For a long time, the bite of the Habu pit viper was a major problem in some regions of Japan. This snake significantly affected people's lives there. For instance, in 1980, around 400 people were bitten, and some of them didn't survive. Japan indeed has several venomous snake species, but the most dangerous ones are snakes like the Habu and its close relatives, the Asian pit vipers. They're part of the same family as rattlesnakes and puff adders, and can be considered distant cousins of cobras and coral snakes. So you can imagine how challenging it is to deal with them. Often people who were bitten were in critical condition. Moreover, for years, there was no anti-venom available. And even when anti-venom was finally developed, the next challenge was its availability. The anti-venom is in liquid form, making it difficult to store in rural areas without electricity or proper storage facilities. Yet most bites occurred precisely in such areas. Building electrical grids in remote areas would take a long time and be very costly. Developing a new anti-venom isn't easy either, and there's no guarantee it would be effective. Finally, Japan tried a seemingly clever solution, introducing a snake-eating animal that's also immune to venom. But, as usual, things didn't go as planned. This is the story of good intentions gone wrong, about how one small species could change an entire island forever. In 1979, about 30 small mongooses were brought to the island of Amami, Oshima, to tackle a local threat. Besides the Habu snake, the presence of rats was also considered a problem, and mongooses were expected to control both. Additionally, mongooses originate from natural habitats in Asia, such as India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and Pakistan, making them suitable for Japan's climate. However, the wildlife in Japan wasn't prepared for guests like them. The impact of the mongoose's presence started becoming clear in 1993. The Ministry of the Environment of Japan began to take notice. It's understandable, given that the mongoose population on the island surged dramatically, reaching its peak of around 10,000 individuals in 2000. Did the snake population decline? Technically yes, but the decline wasn't due to the mongooses. In fact, mongooses aren't interested in venomous prey, although they might seem like the perfect solution at first glance. Mongooses are known for their agility and speed, making them formidable opponents for snakes like cobras, which are relatives of the Habu. They also have special acetylcholine receptors that make them more resistant to cobra venom. This means they can survive deadly bites that would kill other animals. Evolution seems to have specifically designed them to kill snakes with their quick reflexes and sharp teeth for fatal bites. Overall, it seems like there couldn't be a better snake hunter than them. But there's one big problem. Mongooses are diurnal animals, active during the day. Meanwhile, Habu snakes are nocturnal, active at night. This means they almost never meet in the wild, and that's not all. Even if their active times coincided, the outcome might not be different. The problem is that catching snakes isn't easy. It requires extra effort and energy, so why bother when there's easier prey like rats and rabbits? In the end, mongooses completely failed in their primary task. But they succeeded big time in terms of breeding. As a result, in 2000, the Japanese government started a mongoose population control program. Since then, around 32,000 mongooses have been captured. The last capture was recorded in April 2018. For 6 years after that, there were no reports of new mongoose sightings. This animal has truly gone extinct from the island of Amami, Oshima. Experts concluded that the mongoose population was successfully eradicated. The Ministry of the Environment of Japan even officially announced the success of this invasive species eradication program. Everyone welcomed this news except perhaps the mongooses themselves. The journey to this success wasn't easy. Initially, they set traps along the roads, but the results were disappointing. The traps barely attracted the mongooses' attention. The Japanese government eventually realized that a more comprehensive approach was needed. They began using several methods, such as more effective traps, poisonous bait, attractants in the form of appealing scents, and even the assistance of tracking dogs. Various monitoring techniques were also applied, and the results started becoming visible. The number of traps increased over the years, corresponding to the significant decline in the mongoose population. However, these traps weren't ordinary. They were designed specifically for mongooses, with shapes and sizes that prevent accidentally catching other animals. This effort also involved the community. In 2005, a mongoose hunting team consisting of local residents and relevant parties regularly patrolled forests and mountains to capture mongooses. A lot of money, time and effort were spent for one goal: to completely eradicate this invasive species. Some might wonder, why bother? Aren't mongooses just small animals? Why go to such great lengths to get rid of them? The answer is clear. This effort is necessary because instead of controlling snakes as expected, mongooses preyed on native species of the island, including the Amami rabbit and other endemic wildlife. It's worth noting that Amami Oshima is a subtropical island designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The island is home to many rare species, highly vulnerable to extinction. The main target of mongooses turned out not to be snakes, but the Amami rabbit, an ancient species often referred to as a living fossil. This rabbit is the only remaining member of a group of ancient Asian rabbits. They used to be widespread on the mainland, but can now only be found on 2 small islands. Unfortunately, the presence of mongooses has led to a drastic decline in the population of these rabbits in the wild. Not only that, but mongooses also threaten other endemic species like the Ryukyu black-breasted leaf turtle, which is now also endangered. Overall, the presence of mongooses has impacted around 15 native species. Yet, these animals were initially introduced with good intentions. The agricultural sector was also affected. Mongooses prey on poultry, damage fruit farms, and even spread diseases to other animals. Within just 20 years, the habitats of several small animals shrank by up to 40%. It became clear that introducing mongooses to the island was a huge mistake. Islands are unique ecosystems inhabited by local species that aren't accustomed to foreign predators and don't know how to protect themselves from them. Actually, the presence of a new predator would cause problems anywhere, but on an island, the impact can be far worse, especially if the predator is a mongoose, an extremely voracious animal that will eat anything easy to catch. It took almost 25 years to clean the island of this invasive species, and nearly half a century to complete the entire conservation project. Hearing that thousands of mongooses were eradicated might sound harsh, but to protect rare species and the fragile island ecosystem, Japan took the right step. And since mongooses are no longer found on Amami Oshima, it can be said they succeeded. Meanwhile, the incidence of Habu snake bites has gradually decreased. In 2020, the number of bite cases was only around 60 per year. However, as explained earlier, this isn't due to the presence of mongooses. The decline is more attributed to increased public awareness of preventive measures and improved access to anti-venom. With proper and prompt treatment, deaths from venomous snake bites can be prevented. The graph shows that since 1992, there have been no recorded deaths from Habu snake bites. The situation has truly changed dramatically compared to the past.
Although the struggle isn't over yet, mongooses can still be found on other islands in Japan. The experience from Amami Oshima is now used as a model for controlling mongooses in other areas, such as the northern part of Okinawa Island, where this invasive predator has also started appearing. This poses a new risk. If mongooses from Okinawa spread back to Amami Oshima, the entire eradication process would have to start all over again. To prevent this, further preventive measures are being taken. Mongooses were first introduced to Okinawa during the Meiji era, about 70 years before they were brought to Amami Oshima. Back then, only 17 individuals were released. However, conditions in Okinawa are far more ideal for them. The temperature is cooler, and the location is closer to their natural habitat, resulting in higher birth rates and survival rates. Currently, the mongoose population in northern Okinawa is still under control. However, in the central and southern regions, they still roam free. Fortunately, special fences have been installed in some areas. These fences aren't tall but have an L-shaped bottom that's very effective at preventing mongooses from digging, and since mongooses are good climbers, these fences have proven effective in hindering their movement. There's one important similarity between Okinawa and Amami Oshima. The survival of 3 endemic bird species in Okinawa now depends on successfully controlling mongooses. If the story about introducing mongooses to a place to eradicate other animals sounds familiar, you're not mistaken. Japan isn't the first country to try biological control. There's a specific term for this practice, using one species to control another. There's even a branch of science that studies it specifically. Usually, this process starts with research to identify pests and their natural predators. After that, in-depth studies are conducted to ensure that the predator won't negatively impact other species in the new environment. Only then is the predator released as a control solution. Humans have been using this approach for a long time, and in some cases, it has been successful. The most common example is farmers using predatory insects to protect their crops. However, the case of mongooses is very different. Small mongooses from Asia were once introduced to various countries like Cuba, Croatia, Jamaica, Haiti, Honduras, Panama, and many other places. Unfortunately, the results were almost always the same. They became a threat to local biodiversity, not a solution to pests. In another part of the world, specifically in Hawaii, a similar story unfolded even earlier than in Japan. In the 1800s, mongooses were introduced to Hawaii to control the rat population that was damaging sugarcane fields. At that time, sugarcane was cultivated on a large scale, and rats would gnaw on the cane stalks because of their sweet taste. This rat infestation destroyed many harvests, and farmers struggled to control it. In 1872, farmers discovered an article about the success of sugar farmers in the Caribbean who used mongooses to control rats. Inspired by this news, they devised a simple plan: bring mongooses from India and release them into the cane fields, hoping these animals would eat the rats and reduce crop damage. The farmers were pleased and even reported this success in newspapers. Plantation owners in Hawaii thought, if they succeeded, why can't we? In the 1880s, 72 mongooses from Jamaica were brought to Hawaii to be bred. However, not everyone agreed with this decision from the start. Some parties felt that research should have been conducted first to understand how mongooses survived in the Caribbean before releasing them in Hawaii. Unfortunately, the voices of these skeptics were ignored, and the results were far from expected. A significant problem soon emerged. Rats are nocturnal animals, active at night, while mongooses are diurnal, active during the day. In other words, these two animals almost never meet. Instead of eating rats, mongooses started preying on Hawaii's native animals. Bird species and turtles became their next targets because their eggs were highly vulnerable to this predator. The situation became increasingly dire, and eventually, special fences were installed to protect nature reserves from mongoose invasions. However, unlike Japan, Hawaii took action too late. Now, efforts to control the mongoose population are almost impossible. Mongooses have contributed to the extinction of at least 8 native bird species in Hawaii, which are now listed as federally endangered species. Ironically, the Hawaiian government doesn't refer to the introduction of mongooses as biological control because no assessment or study was conducted before they were imported.
However, it can be said that Hawaii is still somewhat fortunate. Let's go back to Jamaica, where it all began. After an English colonist brought mongooses to sugar plantations in 1872, the initial intention was for mongooses to eat rats. However, they didn't do that. Instead, mongooses spread across Jamaica and caused a drastic decline in the population of local birds and reptiles. Without natural predators, insects and arthropods thrived, and a plague of ticks occurred. The colonists complained, but British authorities said the ticks would attack mongooses and the natural balance would restore itself. Was that true? Of course not. Another tragic example occurred on 4 small islands in the Caribbean. There, lizards would typically roam among dry leaves, fighting and foraging. However, on their home island, these lizards have become almost extinct due to mongoose attacks and habitat destruction, with only about 400 individuals remaining in 20 neighboring coastlines. Fortunately, locals acted quickly. They relocated the lizards to safer habitats, and the results were encouraging.
the lizard population increased to nearly 3,000 individuals. Now, scientists are not only working to save them from extinction, but also trying to reintroduce them to their home island. Did you know that using mongooses for pest control is actually very old, dating back over 4,000 years? In a recent study of ancient Egyptian tombs, a unique image was discovered showing someone leading an animal resembling a mongoose with a leash. This is the only image of its kind ever found in ancient Egyptian art. If you look closer, you can see a clear collar indicating that the animal was indeed domesticated. Although mongooses were never truly domesticated or bred in a controlled manner, some cultures have kept them, primarily to ward off snakes, rats and other pests. Interestingly, scientists speculate that the mongoose in the image might have been used to scare away birds, making hunting easier. On the other side of the image, there's another leash that's not attached to a dog, but seemingly to a hornless goat. Now let's jump to the present and head to Sri Lanka. There, like in many other countries, tracking dogs are used to detect illegal goods. But an unusual idea emerged: what if mongooses were used instead? Locals have long utilized mongooses to scare cobras away from their fields, so why not expand their role? With this spirit, a proposal was submitted to the State Department for funding a pilot project. They succeeded in securing $50,000 in funding. The team then hired an expert and obtained permission from the National Zoo to use their land for training. The plan was simple: release a few mongooses into a cargo container full of car parts. If they find anything suspicious, the mongooses will come out with their tails fluffed. A natural warning sign. It sounds impossible, but it turns out mongooses can be trained. They even passed the initial tests, and everyone was very enthusiastic. Unfortunately, the project never really took off due to a change in leadership and shifting political situations. In the end, everything was forgotten. It's a shame, really. They could have made great cops. I would have loved to see a Zootopia sequel with mongoose characters. Anyway, that's the end of our video for today. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any unique and interesting videos. That's it for today's video. Thank you.